Still with me is Congressman Krishnamoorthi from Illinois' 8th Congressional District. Congressman, I want to get to that, but first I have to ask you about this. As you know, this past week, March 4th, QAnon predicted that former President Trump would come back to power. A lot of security concerns at the Capitol. That all went peacefully. But that's not the last date. Next up, May 20th, apparently, is the date that the military is going to put Trump back into power. It's all sort of, interesting talk, but let me ask you, what can be done when there is support for this kind of QAnon-type effort from the writings of Vice President Pence, from Jim Jordan in your chamber? Doesn't Congress have to stick together, former and current members, to try and quash those kinds of efforts which put the Capitol in danger?
We do, Paul, and I'm very disturbed by these dates that are coming up. And indeed, March 4th was a date when the House basically had to cancel the session because of real credible threats to attack the Capitol once again. And, having gone through this once where a real bomb was found 200 feet from my office window, forcing me and my staff to evacuate twice, I can say that this is completely unacceptable. And we really have to come together on both sides to put a stop to this. This is not acceptable in our democracy.
Let's go to H.R. 1. There's so many provisions to that. Let's just take it apart a little bit. First of all, as you know, the Supreme Court this past week basically sounds like they're going to look at some of the restrictions out of Arizona and sort of, bow to the states. So the feds are trying to step in and encourage and permit greater voting freedom for people in a lot of states. But we see, as I've said, over 200 efforts among these states to restrict voting. But it doesn't look like the Senate would pass that kind of provision, and it can't happen on reconciliation. So what happens?
I have several provisions within H.R. 1, so I have a vested interest in making sure that H.R. 1 passes. But you are correct that, unfortunately, Republicans have not agreed to allow this to, go past a filibuster within the Senate. I think this is one of those times where, quite frankly, the issue is so serious and it's so foundational that I do think that Chuck Schumer and others need to look at whether, breaking the filibuster rules in this particular instance makes sense. It's tricky, but it's one of those things where I think that if you don't allow people to vote, and if you allow for states to actively suppress the vote in places like Georgia, where, by the way, Joe Biden's margin really originated, along with places like Arizona. It's going to be very challenging for our democracy to operate properly. Common sense provisions such as, allowing for extended early voting, allowing for mail-in or absentee balloting without excuses, such as we have in Illinois, should happen. And I think that's something that I hope that the Senate takes up and passes.
I want to shift gears for so much to talk to you about, but postal delivery. It is really horrendous, and certainly around this state in many different places. Louis DeJoy, the Postmaster General, he basically says, get used to me, I'm going to be around a long time. And of course, President Biden doesn't have the power to fire him, just to appoint board members. He's appointed 3. But do you get the sense, like, if Republicans or President Trump were still in power and he didn't want DeJoy around, he would just fire him and nobody would say anything? Why can't the Democrats make some shifting happen to improve the postal service? It's like we're just waiting for the board to maybe be done with DeJoy, and it doesn't look like they're going to be.
Well, I'm glad that President Biden actually appointed people to fill the 3 vacant positions. And I do think that that board is going to move to relieve Mr. DeJoy of his duties, because they have no choice. Mr. DeJoy has been a disaster. If you just look at the answers he gave to my questioning, you could kind of detect the sneering condescension in his voice, his disagreement with basic facts that we supplied as part of our questioning that were actually sourced from the USPS. And I think that he's not really in tune with what the American people want from the USPS. As an example, he keeps talking about running the trucks on time and how that is the hallmark of a functioning USPS, when in fact, what my constituents and others care about is whether their mail arrives on time, not whether the trucks arrive on time. or whether they depart on time.
Yeah.
No one cares about that. And yet he's fixated on that issue, even when it means trucks leaving post offices half empty or empty and leaving mail on the docks. So that is a glimpse of his leadership, and we can't allow it to continue.
As they say, all politics is local, and that issue, Congressman, very local, and people feel strongly about it. I wish I had more time with you. We don't, but I thank you for your time on a Sunday morning, and we will talk again soon. Appreciate that.